Catus. Maximus here, this time with the 1940s era New Britain half-inch drive ratchet in this case. This particular ratchet was, or is, the one photoed on the Alloy Artifacts website, which is a historical website, the best one out there for hand tools. They don't do power tools, but they do a lot of hand tools. There was another version of this which had a switch that was down even further around where these lines are. One thing about these older ratchets is you could hold them and easily hit the reverse lever. And on this one, it's a little bit more modern versus the 1930s one where the lever is up a little bit higher. But nonetheless, you can hold the ratchet and easily hit the reverse lever. I really like that a lot. Something about newer ratchets is really the reason that the levers are so high up is it's less parts, less machining, makes it a little bit cheaper. But it is more inconvenient because you always have to reach up or reach with a different hand. This is a standard, what would be known as a 9-inch ratchet. So many tool manufacturers are now measuring from the very end to the handle. That's not where your leverage is. That's not a legitimate measurement to say this is a 10-inch ratchet or to say that this is a 10-inch ratchet. They're 9-inch ratchets. From the center point of the anvil to the end of the handle, that's your leverage. This thing is pretty heavy duty. The easiest way to say it, you can tell by how much it's been beaten. That might explain why the anvil's so loose, but nonetheless, it's certainly held up. We can listen to its sound. It kind of has that hollow sound, so it sounds like it's a swing pawl design, but I do nonetheless like it just because how much work into it. Multiple screws. It actually is a double plate ratchet, so just a lot of machine work. Nice heavy-duty I-beam design with a flush switch, which still managed to get bent. I'll bend that back when I tear it down. Let's get this other unit out of the way here. Pretty heavy-duty. So these New Britons were known as being one of the stronger of the pair-head ratchets back in the 1940s. Found a few posts online. People really did like them, and I can see why. They just threw a huge amount of steel at these. So anyway, not too bad of a ratchet. Actually, I'm going to clean this screw out here, and we'll get it taken apart here. Oh, we can already see that screw's just a bit loose. Glad I am taking this apart. It's probably never been cleaned in 75 years. And so the Alloy Artifacts talks about this being in the 1940s, and I wonder if NS40, if that 40 refers to 1940. But definitely an older ratchet, but it's really seems that once we hit once the World War II era is what I'm saying, ratchets kind of entered a sweet spot where there are just a whole bunch of different designs, plus there are a lot of alloy steels and better machining and manufacturing. Really, we're hitting a sweet spot, and now it seems most ratchets are essentially variations of all similar designs. We'll get out the primary screw, which not sure what it's holding up. All three screws are actually holding this together, but I suspect they're doing something with the pawls, but we'll see in there in just a second here. I find it interesting that these two shorter screws, I wonder if that's related to chrome plating, that the chrome plating has come off, and now we're seeing the copper base layer that the chrome attaches to. Get those out, and we'll pop this top plate off. And indeed is a swing pawl design, but they are two teeth on the swing pawls, not just single teeth. There's a lot of little parts. There's this little pin, but it's just it's not a press fit. And as I was pulling it up, there's a little ball detent. Get rid of that retention pin. Then there's two depressions under this reverse lever, so pretty easy. This reverse lever is just a long piece of sheet metal, and all it's doing is pushing one pawl aside or the other. So this design is definitely, even though it's old, doesn't mean that it's obsolete. These Pittsburgh Pros that people like for their seem to hold up okay for the price. Very same design, except for they just don't have as complicated a switch mechanism. It just has a little cam that's pushing each one of the pawls apart, just like this ratchet that was made 70 years before this Pittsburgh. Let's get this the rest of the way apart, and we'll take a quick look. Interestingly enough, they have like an odd spacer post kind of on the inside there. And then this bottom plate should come off. I wonder if that's more press fit. definitely a lot more on there than the top plate. Sorry for the odd cuts there. So yeah, the bottom plate on this was actually, surprisingly enough, seems to be press fit. It wasn't just, excuse me, damage to the bottom of the ratchet. It actually, interestingly enough, was just hard pressed in there, and I think I understand why. Because normally when you're maintaining the ratchet, you don't need both plates to come off, and to help reduce a little bit of hassle of having to hold this plate and have it all hold together while you have the anvil sticking through, reassembling it. This is actually, I believe, a feature of just making it a little bit easier to reassemble, that this plate ends up holding or staying tight in the bottom of the ratchet, which is actually a nice little feature. We just have a floating spring that goes on each pawl. These little screws right here are what these little pawls swing on, which is a neat little design, and we can see that the size of them is actually pretty substantial. We have two large teeth. They're really, even though this is a pretty coarse wheel, this looks like it's about a 30 tooth, we can see that there's really quite, and actually there's a second step, quite a bit of engagement there. There's just a huge cross section, so I can understand why this took the forces of actually being hit with a hammer, is that's actually pretty substantial tooth engagement. And one thing about the swing pawl design is, as you're pressing against the pawl, it's trying to cause it to roll over like this. So it causes the pawl to dive and actually seat deeper the harder you press in on it. So, and when it's doing that, it's putting pressure essentially in a compressive state against the pawl. And really, in this type of ratchet, you would think a lot of the force would end up on these screws, except for it is smartly designed, and there are these half moon shapes. Really, the screws are there just for alignment, and that compressive force is being directed directly into the body of the ratchet. So overall, a pretty nice design. And everything's just a little bit more oversized, and it allows you the opportunity to have a switch that's nice and low. So anyway, I always wanted to kind of do a video on one of these New Britain ratchets, and I ended up picking one up. Not in the greatest condition, but it still works fine. And just wanted to share that all with you. As far as old or vintage ratchets, it really is true. Even though the pawl design is maybe a bit dated, it's actually pretty heavy duty, pretty strong, and really a pretty nice tool. And you can see why. I mean, look at all these different little parts associated with just a ratchet. And that's one of the reasons they're, you know, different nowadays, is just that's really where a lot of the cost cutting is happening, is reduction of machine work on a ratchet head, reduction in the total number of parts that you're manufacturing. Although I do like these vintage designs, I really like the low and easy to access reverse levers, and looking forward to collecting other old ratchets. I review so many other tools on this channel. It's nice to, with all the modern stuff, to see where the roots were and where it came from. Anyway, I really appreciate everybody who's been watching and subscribing, and if you haven't subscribed, please do. Until next time, Catus Maximus out.